Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 221 here, back in today to talk about Kagurabachi, chapter number 58. This chapter is titled Reunion. And oh, what a reunion it is indeed, because this is a chapter title like last week's, so we don't get the chapter title in like the first 3 pages of the chapter, or it's like on the first page or the second page, or even like shoved in somewhere on the third. We get this chapter title on the very last, like, 3/4 page spread of the chapter. Like, the final 2 pages, we get the chapter title there, which last chapter, I made a little bit of a show, like, okay, we get the chapter title, like, halfway through the chapter. But no, this is one of those chapter titles where we get the chapter at the very, very end. And I really don't think we needed this chapter title at the end. Yeah, sure, it's cool to get this little moment where it's like, oh, reunion, and we see the reunion that has occurred at the end of this chapter, but it's not 100% necessary to, like, get this chapter going, if you know what I'm saying. Like, we could have got this chapter title at the beginning and be like, oh, reunion, what is that going to mean? And then see how that pays off at the very end of the chapter. But I digress. Didn't really need it to happen here, but still, it's cool whenever a manga does this anyway, and hey, I like Kagurabachi, so what can I say? A little bit of a note about the recording of this video. Not only are we multiple chapters behind on Kagurabachi at the time of me recording this, but today is the first time I'm ever sitting with my Kagurabachi volume number 1 English physical, done by, of course, Viz Media, sitting beside me. I've just got it here on my desk, because I don't have it open, being that I've got like a little bit of a reference card of all of the Kagurabachi information on it I need, which I'm going to have to change after this chapter, because, yeah, one of the people on here may be dead, so I don't really need their name on here anymore, but sort of whatever it is, we will get there whenever we get there. But yeah, just a little thing about the print volume, it is pretty nice to have. I know it's been selling really, really well in the States, and being that I've, of course, have been in college, I'm actually currently home from college right now. I got through all my final exams pretty easily and all of that sort of stuff. I won't say pretty easily, I mean, had some final exams, and that sort of is what it is there, but I am back home, and I've now been able to get my hands on Kagurabachi volume number 1, which is pretty neat. It honestly is really weird to just sit down and think about it. If you guys want to see me, my actual thoughts on more of the manga volume itself, I will have the manga haul either up at the very end of the year, here towards the end of the year, of course, like the end of December, beginning of January sort of thing, where I go over all of the manga I bought over a certain period. So you'll see Kagurabachi and a bunch of other various manga volumes that I've spent my money on, which some of them are good money spins, others are like, yeah, why did I buy this? But I digress there. We are here today to talk about, of course, Kagurabachi chapter number 58, which, like I said, very, very good chapter. But before we hop into this chapter, let's talk about what happened last time in Kagurabachi. And of course, chapter number 57, we had the whole end of that conflict there, right after we saw that Mr. Samura had gotten back his enchanted blade at Tobi Mune. He used his crow attack, and like everybody at Secret Tsuji Temple was like, oh my god, what is going on here? We saw that the bowler hat guy left the situation after using a teleportation sorcery, very similar to Mr. Shiba's in a way. So a bit of an interesting thing there, like more people than just Shiba can use that sorcery. And then the whole big thing was like we learned that Fora, who is one of the monks at Secret Tsuji Temple, has actually passed away during all of the conflict. I mean, we pretty much saw him get absolutely eviscerated. And of course, Samura was there like, yeah, this isn't great. It's just going to keep happening more if we're able to run rampant with the enchanted blades. And we also learned the last chapter, after cutting back to the, what do you call that place, if I could think about words, the theater. I don't know why I always forget that name. The theater where, of course, Chihiro and Hirohiko were facing off against each other. There, of course, Hirohiko was, like, provoking Chihiro, like, hey, here's how all this is happening, and Hirohiko, eventually drops the whole information of, hey, Samura's been helping us for a long time, and Chihiro's like, wait, what are you talking about? And eventually the end of the chapter is the big reveal that now Hirohiko has possession of the Kumayori Enchanted Blade, no longer has a personal sorcery of their own, but also, if they are able to use the Kumayori, which sort of has, like, these interesting geisha come out of the blade, we see that means Uruha does not have access to the enchanted blade anymore, which means, oh no, Uruha, which is really what we conquer in this chapter, of course. Hopping into this chapter, we start off with a brief little scene where we see the exact same panel of last time, where we see that Hirohiko has the enchanted blade. It's on the ground. Hirohiko has pulled up the sheath of their mouth, or has their hand on, like, the grip, is, like, pulling it up, and the two geisha appear around Hirohiko. And Chihiro gets a very good look at this. Of course, the same exact panel that we saw last time of where he's looking at, and he's like, oh, Kumayori, it can't be. And then we immediately cut scene away from there to 7 minutes earlier at the Senkutsuji Temple, as we see that we were specifically at the eastern gate of the Senkutsuji Temple, right? As we see that everybody's sort of wrapping up this battle, we see that Samura's around here, we see that Uruha's here, Hakuri, along with the three members of the Makizumi, who we still don't have names, so I will be referring to them as I always have been, as Scarlet, as the bigger dude, Violet, as the healer female of the group, and Mini Samura, as I think you guys know which one he is, by process of elimination at least, right? It looks like, if I'm not mistaken, Violet asks Hakuri, like, hey, are you doing okay, Hakuri? And she's like, hey, I gave you some first aid. We can't treat you fully right now, but the best thing for you to do is just completely rest. As we see that Hakuri is sort of getting a piggyback ride from Scarlet almost in this moment, right? And Violet's like, hey, of course your powers are essential to the Kabanabi, but also for your own sake, you should know this, that pushing yourself hard is just way too dangerous. She's like, hey, but thank you. As we didn't see Mini Samura's like, yeah, without your help, Hakuri, we may have never seen Mr. Samura again. Being that, if Samura did not come back with the Tobimune, then all of the Makizumi would presumably be dead, so they would have never been able to see Samura in this instant, right? And Mini Samura's like, hey, we can currently catch our breath for now, like, hey, even if it takes a while to treat you, or worst case, you never get better. And we see that Violet's like, hey, not that, don't worry about that. But they pretty much just banter back and forth from Mini Samura, like, hey, the enemy forces are depleted, and somebody's like, well, probably they are, right? But eventually, Mini Samura's like, hey, but here's the thing, we have Mr. Samura with Tobimune on our side, there is no need for you to rush Hakuri. And Hakuri doesn't even get a word out during all of this, like, he is just so tired from all of this constant battling, all of this situation just keeps on ensuing during all of this, where on the back of Scarlet, he sort of starts to close his eyes and drift off to sleep in this moment, right? But as this happens, he suddenly wakes up his eyes a indeterminate amount of time later. Of course, we know this scene happens 7 minutes before Hirohiko got to Kumayori, and from what we see here, we get a rough timeline of these events. So this really can't be too much longer after Hakuri just fell asleep. So maybe, if I had to guess, like maybe 3 minutes, or maybe not even after all of this happens. But as we see Hakuri fall asleep, we see him suddenly wake up to a little bit of a situation here. He's laying face first on the ground, and while he gets his bearings of everything around him, he just sees all of the various people just completely knocked out. He looks over and sees Scarlet, who is face first on the ground beside of him, and as Hakuri sort of looks up, he sees that in front of him, both Uruha and Samura are still awake. As we see that a bunch of crow feathers are falling from the sky, as presumably Samura's done something here. And even Uruha sort of says, like, hey, what is all of this about, Samura? As we see that he's just, like, huffing and puffing, like, what's all this about, Mr. Samura? Like, we see that he is very much a little bit tired here, right? And Hakuri sort of just looks around like, okay, I don't see any blood on anybody. Are they all just unconscious? As we get a little bit of a dialogue between both Uruha and Samura in this moment, as Uruha's like, hey, Samura, have you gone mad here, right? And Samura's like, hey, I'm perfectly sane, Uruha. Like, since you got here, me and you haven't had a proper chance to talk yet. And we see that Uruha sort of, like, kneeling on the, or, like, sitting crisscross applesauce all much on the ground. And we see that Samura sort of just goes to sit down on the ground, too, in this little bit of, like, looks like a nice, like, sort of, like, ceremonial area of some sort inside of the Senkutsuji Temple. I'm not really quite sure what you would call this area, all things considered. But we see that Samura gets down on the ground and just says, like, hey, listen, say we keep all of this shenanigans up and we end up recovering all of the enchanted blades. Does that solve anything, Uruha? And Uruha's silent hearing this as Samura's like, hey, if it were that simple, Rokuhiro wouldn't have needed to lock away the Enchanted Blades after the war. As we see, there's a bit of a more pause, as eventually Samura just is like, hey, I haven't held the Enchanted Blade Tobimune in 18 years. So if I'm to wield this thing again in Kunishige Rokuhiro's name, I have to root out evil and protect the weak. And Samura's like, that's correct. That's why we need that sword. We need it to fight the Hishaku. And Uruha's like, they are the ones who killed Mr. Rokuhiro. They are the evil ones. But Samura's just like, but yes, but there's a far filthier evil than the Hishaku that must be punished even if it takes colluding with the Hishaku. And we see that Samura's like, colluding? Like, what does this mean? And we also see that Hakuri sort of putting this all together, like, colluding with the Hishaku, evil. Well, what is Samura up to, right? But Samura eventually just says, like, hey, I'm talking about us, the Sword Bearers. Uruha, 18 years ago, we covered up what happened there. We buried our crimes, and Rokuhiro and the rest of us were lauded as pure heroes. If that's what it took to restore society, we accepted that. And then the youngsters who thought us to be heroes died to protect us from the Hishaku. Of course, Samura's thinking about Fura in this moment, somebody who thought they were heroes, ended up in a not very good place because of all of that, right? And he also thinks about all of the 3 members of the Makizumi, as he just says, like, hey, they will continue to put their lives on the line for us. Their deaths versus our deaths. There's no need to weigh the 2, is there? All 5 sword bearers, including me, will die by my hand. As we just see the image of the other 5 sword bearers, we see, of course, Samura himself, Uruha, we see the sword master wielder of the Magutsumi, and of course the other 2 sword bearers we do not know yet, of course, the female one who is presumably at Sushi Subaru, if I'm not mistaken, and then the blacksmith guy, which I cannot remember his, probably the Kuin Tashiya Shrine, if I'm not mistaken, but we actually don't have confirmation on those 2, but that's sort of my just prediction going on here, but we see the other 5 sword bearers in this moment, right? As Samura just continues like, hey, unlike the Hishaku, with Tobimune, I can slay the sword bearers and spare their protectors, right? And Uruha's like, hey, but, Samura, what are you talking about? Like, hey, if you kill me, the Hishaku will be able to use the Kumayori. Is that really what you want? They're the ones who killed Mr. Rokuhiro, right? And Samura's like, hey, I will only let them use it briefly to kill the Swordmaster. After that, I will kill them all. I won't let them do harm with the Enchanted Blades. In fact, it's a convenient way to smoke out the blades. I told you, Samura. I told you, Uruha. I intend to root out evil. As Uruha's just thinking, like, damn it, like, what could the Hishaku outdo him with the Enchanted Blade? Like, the chances are extremely slim. Like, I believe that he'd be able to take him down before they got too proficient with it, but, like, I don't want them to do harm to the Enchanted Blades, but, like, I don't know what to think about all of this here, right? And Samura then just speaks up again, just like, hey, we settle everything connected to the Enchanted Blades, and we keep the kids out of it. Only the evildoers die. And Uruha's like, hey, well, I understand where you're coming from, but those people died for me. I can't just throw my life away. Of course, thinking to the Kokugoku Steam Squad, who, died all due to Samura, or due to Uruha running away in that instance, right? As in this moment, we see that Hakuri is just seeing all of this situation going on, and we see that he is not doing well at all. He's thinking about all of the massive destruction as all of this happens, and he just thinks, like, Mr. Uruha, like, I can't stand, like, Mr. Uruha will end up being killed, all because I ended up transporting Tobimune, like, I can't do this, right? As Samura just says, like, hey, it's just our egos, all that remains is a battle to the death. As we see that both Samura and Uruha are standing here, enchanted blades in hand, or Samura has the enchanted blade, Uruha does not have an enchanted blade. And there's a little bit of a 2-page spread where we see the 2 of them are getting ready to go after each other. We see, this is of course on page 1213 on the chapter. I need to quickly point out that the image we see of Samura here is actually a reused image from chapter number 54. We saw this at the very end of the chapter where Samura sort of just like leaning down. I remember specifically because I cleaned this image up for a thumbnail on one of my videos, so I know that this has been reused, and I don't think the image of Uruha is, but being that this is one of the last times that, of course, the mangaka Takeru Hokazono will get to draw Uruha, I envisioned that he drawed him originally for this scene, but this is a reuse of the Samura scene here. As we see that Hakuri is just laying here on the ground like, wait, Chihiro, wait! We also see this is the third time that this image of Hakuri is reused in this chapter alone. Hokazono, you need a break. I'm glad that you ended up getting one, as we will get to here in a second. But in this moment, we see that Uruha and Samura get ready to do their attacks, and they end up going through. We, of course, get the note of, like, hey, this is the EI White Purity style, as we just see the image of Samura drawing out the Tobimune Enchanted Blade, and we just see that the EI White Purity style signboard with, like, the two unknown master names, and, of course, Samura and his pupil Uruha. And we just see that Samura has cut down Uruha right on his left shoulder in this moment, right? As Hakuri just looks at this and is just freaked out as all of this happens. Or no, I'm sorry. We end up seeing here that Samura puts down his enchanted blade and grabs a different blade. So he's not using Tobimune here, he's just using a regular blade, I guess, to have it be on a more level playing field with his pupil. We see Uruha completely fall to the ground as, who's his face? Hakuri's just thinking like, damn it, it's my fault. If only I pushed myself and transported Kumeyori here too. No, like, quick, I have to do something right. As he's just thinking through literally all of this. And we see that Uruha is just falling onto the ground, and he's just like, are you going to really shoulder this alone, Samura? And Samura just looks down at Uruha and just says, yes. Nobody else has to endure this hell. As we see in this moment that Hakuri is focusing even more power, he's using the storehouse, and he starts to summon something, and as we will see in a second, it is Chihiro himself. As we see that Samura just goes through, takes the enchanted blade, and deals another blow to Uruha, almost certainly killing him in this moment. As we see that Chihiro starts to appear out from, of course, Hakuri's storehouse teleportation, and we see that Chihiro arrives here on the scene, as Samura, of course, he arrives looking at the scene of Samura completely taking out Uruha, and Samura just says like, oh, Chihiro, you sure are drenched in the stench of blood. As we get to chapter number 58, titled Reunion, in this moment, where, of course, we see the reunion between Chihiro and Samura, definitely how none of us envisioned this scene to happen. And yeah, that's the end of this Kagurabachi chapter number 58. Really interesting chapter. It really sucks that Uruha does seem to be dead here. Uruha was definitely one of my favorite characters going into this series, and it really sucks that he got taken out. But I mean, I saw a few posts online like, hey, Samura was around for about 10 chapters, and in those 10 chapters, he really proved who he was as a character, and he got his point across of who he was, and Hokazono has then just used this to say like, oh yeah, here we have now introduced Samura as another conflicting force. Of course, we understand that Samura's motivation is, hey, I see all the evil here, so I'm going to make sure nobody can ever use the enchanted blades. Again, by not only killing all the sword bearers, but then also killing myself, along with the Hashaku who try to use the swords for evil. Now, is it just me, or is there a massive loophole in Samura's plan that, like, hey, can't more people just pick up the swords and use them? Like, there's nothing stopping anybody from just picking up one of these swords and then becoming one of the most powerful people in the world in this moment. Like, what is Samura going to do to the blades? Is he going to, like, destroy them somehow? I mean, we know that Cloud Gouger is out of the picture as of right now, right? There are only 6 enchanted blades, including Chihiro's 7th enchanted blade. So, Cloud Gouger is just out of the picture, but, like, what is he going to do about Magatsumi? Of course, he wants the, what's it called? the, oh golly, what were they named? The Hishakono, while I was blanking on that, to end up killing the Sword Master because the Sword Master has done this thing. Also in this chapter, we get alluded to the whole cover-up that apparently happened. Whenever Samura was like, hey, we were all there 18 years ago. Like, we buried our crimes. Like, we covered up what happened there. Which is very interesting. Like, how bad was this war, actually? I mean, we've just seen sights of it, and it looks chaotic as can be, but, like, we really don't know the full picture of it, which is where a flashback of this scene is going to go extremely hard whenever we get it. But yeah, I mean, really, Uruha is dead. That is pretty much confirmed, and it seems that, yeah, we knew Samura was a traitor, but now we have full confirmation of it here, and I'm just interested to see where this goes next time. I mean, what is Chihiro going to end up doing against Samura? Like, what is going to happen? Now, one of the other things I alluded to in this chapter was a bunch of the reused panels that we have been getting. Next week, as far as Kagurabachi goes, or I mean, at this point, 3 weeks ago, being that I'm recording this video so late, I am so sorry. I will try to get these things out faster. But next time we are getting chapter number 100, not 100, we're getting chapter number 58.1, so like a little bit of like a shorter chapter in the middle of all of these other chapters. But pretty much giving time for Hokazono to take a break, relax, and hopefully get back on the Kagurabachi grind to give us some insane, good old crazy Kagurabachi stuff going on. Because, if I'm not mistaken, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reused panels in this chapter. And one of those is the Hakuri panel, which is reused, let's see, it's reused once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, I think just 7 times, and maybe you could argue for an 8th and a 9th also, but I'm not really think it's truly that. But yeah, Hokazono needs a break, and he has got one in this moment. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching this Kagurabachi chapter number review. Of course, this is chapter number 58 of the series. I've talked about Kagurabachi about 12 other times at this point, so go check out all of those videos. They'll be linked at the end card on this video and also down in the description box down below. Check out those. If you enjoyed this manga review of Kagurabachi, I do plenty of other ones on the channel. Just go to my channel, Glowplasma. You are currently here on the channel, so just go to the channel and browse all my other content. I did Oshinoko chapter reviews. I'm on a break in that sort of time slot because Oshinoko has ended. Talk about World Trigger whenever I get around to it. Talk about some anime series. Talk about Weekly Shonen Jump. I talk about a lot of things. Just check channel. If anything piques your interest, maybe you won't mind giving it a check out. I mean, that'd be pretty neat. But yeah. With all of that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi, chapter number 58.1. Of course, this has been chapter number 58, and I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma, signing out.